Well, it was Ronald Reagan who quipped, the government's approach to business is, if something's moving, tax it. If it's still moving, regulate it. When it stops moving, subsidize it. That seems to be Justin Trudeau's approach with oil. I think after taxing and regulating it to death, at least in Alberta, Seamus O'Regan, perhaps the dumbest cabinet minister in the country, has announced a massive subsidy for oil, but only oil in O'Regan's region of Atlantic Canada. It's very strange because I thought we were supposed to decarbonize and have a net zero carbon future, don't you know? Well, compare that to the approach taken by Donald Trump in the United States, who says, drill, dig, mine, go for it, frack like crazy. And most recently, he signed a permit for the A2A cross-border rail project. That stands for Alaska to Alberta, a proposed $22 billion railway that would ship not just oil, but other commodities from the Canadian heartland in Alberta, through the Yukon, into Alaska, and out by their ports. Now, approving the permit is not the same as approving the project. It still has to go through some environmental assessments on the U.S. side. But would this project ever be allowed to live on the Canadian side? Joining us now via Skype is our friend, our Alberta Bureau Chief and our Chief Reporter, Sheila Gunn Reid. Sheila, great to see you again.
Hey, Ezra, thanks for having me on the show.
Welcome on, it's my pleasure. And you, in many ways, are our oil and gas expert. Look, it's one thing for President Trump to say, yeah, guys, go for it, $22 billion rail line, I'm all for it. And I think that the U.S. side would probably approve it. Alaska is very pro-development for oil and gas and railway and forestry. That's the culture up there. I don't think any problems would come on the U.S. side, but I have a tough time believing that Justin Trudeau would permit a rail line like this in Canada.
I do too, and I think this rail line has a long way to go, and a lot of Liberal hurdles are in its way remaining, because it does have to go through the environmental impact assessment, and that's done through Environment Canada. And it has to be found in the public interest, which is a very vague way of saying, do the Liberals like it or not? And this thing will have to go through the GBA plus process, which is the gender-based analysis plus process. So before Alberta is allowed to take advantage of 2,600 kilometers of track, a $22 billion construction project, something that will not just move oil, because this is a pipeline by rail, but other fossil fuels through there, as well as food, which is great for Alaska to be able to access Alberta foodstuffs, because the cost of living is so expensive up there. Before all of that happens, we have to go through former Environment Minister Catherine McKenna's process of making sure that no women and sexual minorities' feelings are hurt before they can start construction.
Yeah. Now, I note that according to A2A, the company itself, there will be 18,000 jobs. I mean, when you think about building a railway, some of that is easy terrain, but some of it is not. There's bridges, there's tunnels, there's engineering, there's construction. By the way, I am certain that a lot of that construction would be done by Indigenous Canadians, not just because I'm sure the railway would make those deals with local Indian bands, but that's who's living up there. So this would be an enormous, I mean, $22 billion to begin with is more expensive than any of the proposed pipelines, where the Energy East pipeline, which was the most expensive one on the books, was $15.7 billion when it was nuked by Trudeau. So this, I mean, a $22 billion project, the amount of families this will feed, the amount of families this will hire, and these are real jobs, not fake CERB don't work payments. This, I mean, the Liberal government makes big press release announcements for $50,000 patronage type grants. A $22 billion project would be immediately the biggest infrastructure project in Canada, and I am just as certain that it will be killed as the other projects I've named.
Well, and what they are going to kill, if they do indeed kill it, is a marvel of modern engineering. we have to remember that this rail line will go places where roads are unable to be built. I remember just a couple of years ago, a gravel highway in the north was, celebrated as something that we would never see. There are no year-round roads in some of these places. So getting food in and getting resources in is something that either only happens in the summer or happens by barge or is flown in. And the benefit to people along this rail line is going to be huge. And again, the Liberals could very well cancel it because it will be, for all intents and purposes, a pipeline by rail, and they just can't have that.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.